We're joined from Washington, D.C. by Dr. Reza Khanzadeh, Iran and Middle East analyst and professor at George Mason University. Dr. Khanzadeh, welcome to Asiaone News, and thank you for joining us. Now, reports suggest that the U.S., Iran and Oman are close to a 60-day deal on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Is this a genuine breakthrough, or is this just some tactical breathing room?
I do believe this is a good breakthrough. I would change the phrasing though. We don't know to what extent the United States has been involved in those negotiations between Iran and Oman. Obviously with back channel diplomacy, there is a high likelihood that the U.S. has been involved. But given the tension that's been ongoing between the U.S. and Iran, to put it lightly, considering that they are at war with each other, I think the main focus for the Islamic Republic has been the narrative that issues pertaining to the Middle East should only involve the countries in the Middle East, because geography doesn't change. But from the United States perspective, every 4 to 8 years, the presidency changes, policy changes, and America is a whole ocean away. So at the end of the day, it is between Iran and Oman what is going to constitute free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think what's going to play out now is that this deal is really a reset, if you will, to then try to get back to the MOU and then start further negotiations on other issues that then can be between the U.S. and Iran. But even then, I don't think it's going to be direct talks, because Iran just they have no trust in the United States and specifically Trump. And we've seen Trump. There's a reason why people call him Taco now, right? Trump always chickens out, because he makes all these outlandish remarks, bombastic remarks, talking about ending a civilization or decapitation, and then he chickens out, he backs out, and he makes all these comments that people called him and begged him and things of that nature. But it's so complex what's really transpiring with this conflict that it's not as simple as someone calling Trump and saying, please don't attack. It's much more complicated than that.
And of course, he's also swung between sort of giving us mixed messages, saying that talks are underway and then saying it's Iran's last chance, while Tehran denies that direct talks are even happening. So what does all these contradictions reveal about the negotiating dynamic going on?
I think this reveals a lot, not just from the negotiation standpoint, but also from the military standpoint. So we've seen a couple leaks recently come out from the United States showing that there is a depletion in the military arsenal from the U.S. standpoint, and we've kind of seen this in the past where the U.S. would attack Iran for a couple of days, a week or two, and then take a break, and then maybe for a week there would be a pause in the attacks, and then they would attack again. And many experts have pointed to the fact that the U.S. takes those breaks in order to move their military equipment around, being able to reload, so to speak, or being able to buy some more time for themselves to build more weapons in order to have enough capability militarily to attack again. And that's why we saw at the most recent pause in the attacks from the U.S., we saw Iran have that surprise attack on the United States, because from the calculus of Iran, they see what is holding the United States back. They see that militarily, that the U.S. Is really, I wouldn't say struggling, but they are really at a point right now where they need to be careful how much more of their weapons they use. And Iran saw that as an opening for them to attack and kind of catch the U.S. by surprise. But then, so that's militarily. But then you also have the politics involved as well, where obviously we all know that in November is the midterm elections in the United States, which is a huge deal, domestically, not so much for Trump, but for his party. It is a very important, you know, moment for the House and the Senate, since they're both being held by his party, that they might lose both of those, um, parts of the government uh, in November. But for Trump, that's not very important to him, because for him, it's his legacy. It's him being able to shape a narrative, build a narrative that shows him as this powerful and um, you know, impactful type of president. And he cares very little about the midterm elections. He's even stated that before. He cares very little about his political party, because if you follow the history of Trump, he wasn't always a Republican. He at multiple points in his life, he was either a Democrat or a independent. So we have that type of calculation to keep in mind as well. So like, military politics, but then also regionally as well.
Yes.
Uh, we have a lot of other conflicts occurring at the same time, right? We have, Israel and Lebanon, we have Saudi Arabia and the Houthis in Yemen. So there's a lot of complexities there to kind of pinpoint one or another to see what could transpire. But that's why we see all these conflicting messages as well from Trump, because again, he's not a politician, he's not a diplomat, he's a businessman, he's essentially like a charlatan. So he doesn't really understand the complexities of what's going on.
Well, as you quite rightly said, we don't know whether the US is taking part in these talks about the Strait of Hormuz. But if the arrangement between, the regional partners like Iran and Oman, if it holds, what does it change domestically for both Iran and the US?
Well, I think for the US, it could be an embarrassment, to say the least, because time and again, in these past 6 months um, of this conflict, Trump, his administration, a lot of the politicians within Washington, D.C. have been saying that it is unacceptable, essentially a red line for the United States, for Iran to charge any type of monetary fee, whatever they want to call it, whether it's environmental or safety or whatever the case may be. It is a red line for the United States, for Iran, to charge any type of monetary fee at the Strait of Hormuz. And a deal that's being brokered now between Iran and Oman is pointing that it's going in that direction. There may be a pause on that fee in the short-term future, but midterm to long-term, Iran is going to have that type of control over the strait. And for the United States domestically, they are essentially stuck between a rock and a hard place, because either they, escalate militarily to stop Iran from doing that, or they turn, they like look the other way essentially and just allow this to happen. But either way, it's a lose-lose scenario for the Trump administration and for future presidents in the United States, until trust can be rebuilt, or some type of um, open dialogue of diplomacy, kind of what we saw during the Obama administration with the JCPOA, where there, even back then, there wasn't trust, but there was a level of respect where they could have these types of conversations. Until we get to that point again, I think Iran is going to essentially hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage, so to speak, with these fees, with these tolls, because they understand once they let go of that power, then it's essentially open season for Israel and the United States to bomb Iran whenever they want, without any type of, you know, um, answer, or casualties, or answers from Iran. But then also domestically for Iran, this regime is essentially hated by the vast majority of the population inside Iran. Roughly 80% do not want this regime to exist in the state that it exists right now. And one of the main reasons why is, obviously it's, terrible human rights record, and it's,
Yeah.
punishment of protesters and women's, but it's also because of the economy. So, domestically, if this regime can point to the Strait of Hormuz and being able to have a revenue stream from the Strait of Hormuz, that can buy them a lifeline, domestically with that 80% of the population. Obviously not all of them are going to be happy about it, but still it could kind of pacify that type of uprising. Because once this international conflict is over, then this regime has to turn its attention domestically because protests will continue
Yeah.
once this conflict is over.
Khanzadeh, thank you so much for your insights.